Okay, guys, so I wanted to go into this video. Now, obviously, I don't have the backdrop like I normally do, which has that professional look to it for disability resolution, space constitution, stuff like that. But we'll be having that in the not too distant future. I just have to literally clear out all of this stuff and this stuff behind me, which is just a massive, massive amount of stands and audio gear, video gear, etc. Now, with that said, let me get the camera right up here. Perfect. What I need you to know is that I have purposely not talked about this particular topic because I have feared going into it in detail. And I want to go through it because I'm going to use general terms when explaining what's going on. But as you know, COVID was a transitional period for the Social Security Administration when it comes to disability benefits at the Office of Hearing Operations, OHO, specifically for administrative law judges. All right, so what did I just say there? The whole thing that I've just said there, and howdy, guys. Howdy, Mitch Collins gang, Walter Scott, Angel Alston, Candy Jones. Howdy, Julie Tree. Howdy, howdy. So what I just said there is that the judges, the administrative law judges, they did a mass hiring, right? They are now trained. They are now doing adjudications. It's the fastest ALJs have ever been put back, been hired, trained, put on the spot, doing hearings, etc. that the SSA has really had within the past couple of decades. What's happened, though, that nobody is actually talking about or telling you about is something that you would never have access to, which is something that I didn't have access to until I reached out about it because I knew it was going on. I was wondering who would talk. So what's happening is basically that administrative law judges are under different training schedules, different training systems. But most importantly, the original group that would hire them, bring them on, review them, etc., is no longer that group. Now, I'm speaking in general terms because I don't want to get in trouble here, but what happened was the SSA took a much firmer grasp and specific agency position on overseeing the administrative law judges. So what used to be the system was that you had kind of like these autonomous creatures called judges. They were allowed to make more, removed, we use that word, decisions relating to adjudications. Now, the general rule that you've all known, that everybody talks about, is that you get 2 denials and then you have your best shot at being found disabled, right? That's like the classic rule that we all go by, that we all think is like your best shot at being found disabled. But you've probably also noticed that a lot of individuals who used to be like I'm a genius and I know everything. Like everybody's got that friend where they're like, I'm a genius and I know everything, blah, blah, blah. Well, the ones that would say that about disability, that whole group of people has largely died off. They've just basically not been present and they've been slowly going away and going away. And that's for a couple of reasons. Those people who never studied the system, don't know the laws of the system, have never adjudicated claims, been in front of administrative law judges representing somebody, those people in particular, where they said, oh, they knew everything. The reason they died off is a couple of reasons. Number one, a lot of them are going through basically a review of their benefits and they're not doing well, which means that all of their little yada yadas, didn't work. Their little classic, oh, I'm a genius things. The other thing, too, is that the system has gotten significantly harder to get found disabled on. So just telling somebody that they just have to go to the hospital and collect medical evidence doesn't work anymore. I mean, if you look at some of the channels for non-attorneys, and non-attorney reps or the digest one of their big videos was like, this is how you win disability benefits no matter what. And that application, that's one of the tools, but that's not a main tool anymore. It's not even a specific thing that wins these benefits. So the problem you run into is that there's a change occurring, and the change is with those who give you the highest likelihood of being found disabled. And so what happened was when there was an agency change from one group that would hire, train, organize, work with the administrative law judges to a more SSA oriented group, you had less autonomous, more, and I'm trying to use specific words here that are going to keep me out of trouble here. You have people who are more aligned with the teachings of the Social Security Administration and their ultimate goals. And so what's happening here is that basically these judges that we're getting now, the newly trained ones, are very different than the ones we had back in the day. And as you know, or maybe you didn't, a lot of those old school judges that we had, a lot of them retired during essentially, COVID and the end of COVID. Now, we had really terrible older judges. There were some judges that had a 10% passage rate, 15% passage rate. If you were in a coma, they still weren't going to find you disabled. We have younger judges that do really weird stuff. For example, they won't approve anybody over 50 years old, or if it's a particular type of mental impairment, they just won't approve it, or if it's like a fibromyalgia claim, they just won't take it seriously. Those are out there. They're all out there. But what's happening is we're experiencing less and less of these one-off judges. And as disability attorneys, we just hope that one day they move to some other place. And let me tell you a little bit of a secret about Florida. Most of these disability judges want to be transferred to live in Florida. That's how it works. That's the game. What they want to do is they want to be transferred to Florida from whatever state. Could be Wisconsin, could be Nebraska, could be North Dakota, whatever. They all put in for their transfers to go to Florida. So Florida tends to get the judges that the SSA wants to keep happy to transfer them to essentially places that they want to go. So we've got some really great judges in Florida because it's like a funnel zone. However, and remember, I have to be careful with this video because it could get me in trouble. However, the thing that's happening overall is that all of the new judges are going through a very different training schedule and a very different training setup and a very different understanding as to how to adjudicate these claims. So what we're noticing is that you've got basically three categories of judges. You've got the older, old school ones. You have the ones that were basically, hired 15, 20 years ago. And then you have those judges that have been hired within the past 10 years. And so what happens is these judges that have been hired within the past 10 years, they have a very different stylistic approach to doing this. They have a very different approval system. Like, what are they looking for the claim to be approved? And the SSA is in control of how many claims ultimately at the end of the day they really want approved. And let me say that again, because you might not grasp the largeness of it. When you go in front of a judge, the expectation is that it's supposed to be neutral based off of the, listings, statutes, POMs, whatever. It's supposed to be completely neutral. However, when the agency is in control of training the judges, and they are more in control over hiring and reviews. Like if a judge gives too many approvals and the percentage passage rate is too high, and then they can put that administrative law judge under review, you start to see, kind of like with police officers and sheriffs, quotas. Now, the quota system was okay back in the day. It worked. It was okay. But what we're seeing is more and more of this tightening on the quota numbers. We're seeing more and more, and you can look at it, just go to disabilityjudges.com. You'll see that literally the quota numbers are starting to shift. So when people ask me, what is the number one reason I was denied for disability benefits? My first question is, did you go to an administrative law judge hearing? If you did, my next question is, which one was your judge? So I want to tell you a little bit about how this works when it comes to these judges. And sorry about the little thing in the background. That's the AC unit. But the thing is this, and I really need you to understand it. And this is, back in the day, 15 years ago, you had a lot of people who could still go grocery shopping and could still, basically, do laundry, cleaning around the house, maybe a little house upkeep, little handyman repair stuff, handy person repair stuff. You still had those people being found disabled. You had, girlfriends and boyfriends that were potheads, and they would get through and they would just kind of coast. They would just coast. That's not the system we have anymore. Some of that, and a large part of that, is due to the bias and the abuse that occurred. I mean, there was that one attorney called Mr. Social Security who was in cahoots with that one judge, and millions of dollars of claims were paid that should not have been paid. There was the 9/11 scandal, where basically a lot of firemen and the law enforcement people basically were instructed, with their advocate on how to basically work the system to get onto disability benefits when they weren't really disabled for PTSD. Some of them absolutely were, definitively, but then some of them were not. So what happened is that the SSA was facing this overwhelming situation, and I want you to understand their side of it too, because it's not just a rah rah rah. How could they? How dare they? There's another side to this that you've got to understand. So what happened is this: the SSA was facing a tough situation, which is that it was approving a significant amount of people, and the trust funds were starting to look gray at the gills, which we already know the retirement one is like really gray at the gills. And as a result of that, the government was paying out these massive amounts of benefits for SSI. And so the thing is, when we have Republicans in, the Republicans are fully aware that SSI people tend to always vote Democrat. They tend to lean Democrat. People who haven't worked traditional jobs, and you can say whatever you want to say. You can be the one-off person, put whatever you want in the comments. It's fine. I'm not attacking you. It's just, it is what it is. But if you haven't worked in America doing a job consistently, you don't have the same understanding of money. You just don't. You don't have the same understanding as to what things cost, to the ratio of what it costs to earn them, what it costs of you to physically obtain the money to be able to purchase them. Because you've always been to some degree on some benefit-based track, whether it's a family member helping you out, or it's or it's the SSI benefits or food stamps or whatever. There's always been, or you're a mom and you have young kids and you're getting some, temporary assistance for needy families, whatever. Your brain is wired differently over enough period of time when you haven't done the work like other people. You could say, no, I've done the work, I just didn't have recent, and I get it. Then you're part of a different category and you're a small percentage of the SSI recipients. That means that you are different because you did work, you just didn't work recently. But for those individuals who have never really worked much, your brain is wired differently. And the votes tend to lean left. Not saying a good thing, not saying a bad thing. It's just they tend to lean left. So when you have Republicans in, they're looking at the problem of SSI. When you have Democrats in, they're looking at SSI being the solution, boosting SSI, the more SSI. And SSI, of course, has no cutoff valve because it comes from the general funds, the general taxes. Whereas SSDI benefits and retirement benefits, they have a cutoff valve because, very simply put, and it's very easy to see, you pay in for your prior generation receiving the benefits. So when I look at this system, I can tell you exactly where the approval ratings of Social Security benefits are going to go. We're seeing people rushed right now because of the whole COVID situation. So what does that mean? We saw a massive amount of people apply for disability benefits during COVID. Some of them were getting unemployment. They were looking for an extra check thereafter. Some of them didn't know what they wanted to do. Some of them were just trying to retire early because you go on SSDI benefits, early, you get to sit on that until you reach full retirement. So the bottom line here is that there was a massive influx of people applying. And when they applied, the people at the SSA started to drop off. They started to quit because they were getting this full basket. And remember, each one of these employees, whether it's a judge, a DDS rep, an adjudicator, each one of these adjudicators has essentially a quota. And sometimes you're required to fill the quota and process as many claims as possible during a period of time. That quota essentially dictates how many they could potentially put on your plate, how many claims. And the reality is that most of the people at the SSA over the past couple of years have had completely filled quotas, which is why a lot of the people at the SSA, and they calculated that, but it's probably higher than that right now, 1 out of 8 employee would essentially quit. And so what that means is that you have not enough people processing claims, the people who are processing claims at max capacity, and everybody's unhappy because it's taking forever. So what happened is that the SSA now has to look at this and say, okay, we've got a problem. We are still approving too many people. We've got a ratio issue. And remember, if you look at the overall statistical ratio of this whole thing, we've almost got 100 million people on Medicaid, which is helped because of the amount on COVID, with that allowance. But at the end of the day, when people are like, well, we don't have a socialist nation, we do. We have a socialist nation because there's that many people who can't make enough money to go ahead and succeed. Now, you'll hear older people say, well, younger people just don't want to work. And I don't disagree with that. There is a large portion of the youth that do not want to work. I tried to hire somebody to go work on that house that I'm trying to basically purchase and restore and rent out. I tried to hire people to help me clean it. I've had a total now, and that includes one older person, but a total of 7 people who said they would come and do it who just never showed up. So I get it. I get where they're coming from with that. But at the same time, all this comes down to the ratio problem of worth of the money received. People don't want to work for $11 an hour, $12 an hour, $13 an hour. They don't. They'd rather sit at home, play video games, and have mom and dad pay for them. So I get it. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I get it. Okay. However, the SSA still has a problem, and the problem is too many approvals. Now, as you guys know, when it comes to training the adjudicators, if you control the training of the adjudicators and you control the reviewal process as to whether or not they are following the system that the SSA has put in place, then you control the law. You control the dictated outcomes of these claims. They didn't always have that. And about 10, 15 years ago, that started to transition. Now we are at the point where the SSA has near total control over that. So what we're going to see is the SSA changing the culture of the approvals to be more denials, and the culture of the denials essentially not ever really getting approvals because they're trying to reduce the overall mathematical amount of people who are receiving benefits, because it's just a lot of people. This is offset by those who are in the highest positions. So we're talking like President of the United States, you know, which party's leading, etc. Like who's leading the House, who's leading the Senate, who's leading the White House. So as a result of that, in a current scenario with the current White House, President Biden, VP Kamala Harris, with the current scenario, you're going to see a big push for SSI to be, you know, continued for approvals and payout and things like that. And SSI for the 7-year program for the refugees and the immigrants and things like that, because that's vote farming. But in 2 years, you may not see that. You may see a switch over to a more Republican side, which means that the SSI people are going to see more restrictions, more issues, etc. And the SSDI/retirement people, you might see more benefits going their way. However, you have to understand the logic of the game. If you were ever young and you played like the game of Monopoly, right? And you controlled all the railroads, or you controlled all their properties on one particular spot, you had what's called a monopoly on that thing. Same thing with SSA benefits. If you have a monopoly essentially on the training of the judges, the review of the judges, the punishment of the judges, etc., then what you end up with is a system that I can't do much within. But let's just be realistic about it, that I can't do much within. So, like our criminal law system, right? Our criminal law system is not controlled in the same way as the SSA when it comes to disability benefits. Like our personal injury system, it's not controlled in the same way that our Social Security benefits are. You're starting to realize how absolutely horrifying this is going to become. And the reason why is these judges that we see in our personal injury, our criminal law, our taxation, our whatever. Well, taxation is a little bit more control there, but mostly the judges are removed. It's like its own judicial thing. It's like its own animal. It's over here. We keep it over here separate from the big ball that we live in, because we want them to be neutral. We want them to apply their knowledge, morals, ethics, etc., to make good decisions. That is not how the SSA works. The SSA works by essentially now controlling most aspects of the administrative law judges. Now, what is the only savior to that? The only savior to that is that once you get a denial from the ALJ hearing, you go to appeals council, AAJs, which are your appeal judges, your appellate administrative judges. Those judges, okay, are still controlled by the SSA. In fact, many of them are just, judges that can't do the in-person or don't do the hearings, whatever. Some people would be good for hearings. Some people would be good for just reviewing claim files, right? Some people are good for, interacting with the actual person in front of them. Some people are good at just reading the file. Okay. Interacting with the person in front of them, that's probably more of my style if I were to be a judge, versus somebody who essentially would be, who just reads the record and tries to find every little detail in it. Once you get done with the appeals council, let's say you get another denial, you go to district court. It could be the North District, South District, Middle District, but you go to a district court in your state at the federal level. And here's the problem, though. Those courts tend to be a bit anti-disability benefits because they're tired of seeing so many of them brought up. So let me put it to you another way. The traditional cases that a court would see at that district level didn't always used to be a lot of disability claims. Now there are a lot of disability claims. There's a lot of them, and the judges want to get them remanded back down to the SSA or just do a denial if they can. It depends on what legal rulings they have in their preference, but, in their favor of being able to do it, but they don't want to see a lot of them. What proof do I have of this? Well, I've been there for it, but also how many disability claims reach the Supreme Court of the United States? Extremely, extremely few. Extremely few. How much of a constitutional right do you have to Social Security disability benefits? It's limited. It is limited. So what I'm saying in this video, and I want to summarize because sometimes if I don't summarize, people don't get what I'm saying. The SSA is controlling the hiring, the firing, the review, the training, the upkeep of the administrative law judges, more so than they've ever done before. They've just hired on a massive batch of new administrative law judges to combat the amount of people who are essentially applying for disability benefits. So when you guys sit back and ask me, what do I think is the absolute most horrifying thing that's happening in this field, which is why I think they might erase this video, is that the adjudicators are not separate from the agency who basically handles the de facto approvals and denials and where they want the culture of this entire industry to go. The judges are supposed to be a separate entity. They're supposed to be removed from the overall adjudication process. So that's what I would say is the problem, because when the judges are that controlled or can be put under review by the Social Security Administration, you end up with judges that de facto cannot be unbiased. They have to be biased because they are educated, reviewed, defined by the system that the SSA put in place. Normally, the way it works is the judge would study the SSA system and then deliver adjudications that are fair based upon the rules that exist. But when the system is really taking the reins over the administrative law judges, that's when it falls apart. That's when you start to get into like this whole, is the court system actually neutral? Is it removed enough? I say it's not. I think the way the old judges were doing it was more proper, but I don't think we'll ever go back to that because there's not enough people who have time to fight for the benefits and the rights of the disabled. I certainly have hardly any time just trying to keep up with the hearings. And that's the brilliant part of it. Because they didn't raise that $6,000 limit, and because we sit at 25% as attorneys as opposed to 33%, we make less than most other legal fields of attorneys, which means that like when it comes to extracurricular stuff, like fighting for the rights of the disabled, doing this or doing that, or being on some group that reviews them and aggressively goes after them, we don't have the money to do it because we don't have the time, because we can't hire enough people to do the easier stuff at the law firm, like the rinse, repeat, the fill out this form, send it in stuff. So we have to do it. And because we have to do it, we don't have the time to have other people do it, which means we don't get the time to do the extracurricular stuff to fight for you in a larger sense. It's smart. It's what it's how you take over an industry, by slowly gobbling little pieces time after time. All right, guys, I will catch you all a little bit later. I might do one more video, but I just wanted to give you an update as to what the main problem is that I'm seeing. And you're going to be seeing a lot of interesting decisions from recently trained judges now coming up. And remember, Those aren't just decisions for new applicants. Those are decisions for people who have had benefits for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, etc. And remember, all those people who are just like, oh, you just do this. Good luck. Good luck, because it's going to be a very, very, very scary system in the future. And I think one of the things that you can do to protect yourself is to learn more and more every single day about it. But the most crucial thing is learn the listing requirements for your particular impairments, and always make sure that your doctors are writing down why you are so severe. Because a lot of you guys just go to the doctor, get a medical update with medication. Doctor writes down the meds are working because you just came back from. You do that for a couple of years, you're an easy denial. Easy target. Anyways, guys, I'll catch you a little bit later. I hope all's well. You have a wonderful day. I'm going to be back in about 5 minutes. We'll do one more video, and then I've got to go do calls. I'll catch you later. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.